The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of place where every house looked similar with neatly trimmed lawns and tidy fences. The streets were lined with maple trees that offered a gentle shade in the afternoons, and children's laughter sometimes echoed from the distant playground. Life in this community moved slowly, peacefully, and most residents enjoyed a sense of safety and routine. But beneath the calm surface, there was a strict homeowners association that watched over the neighborhood with an almost obsessive eye. Every minor detail was monitored, and some members were known to enforce rules in ways that went far beyond what most people considered normal. Among them was Karen, a woman who took it upon herself to be the eyes and ears of the HOA. She had a reputation for being strict, judgmental and relentless when she believed someone was violating the community's rules. She was always ready with a complaint or a warning, and neighbors had learned to be cautious in her presence. At the end of one quiet street lived a 78-year-old veteran. He had served his country long ago, seen things most people could not imagine, and carried his experiences with a quiet dignity. His small house, modest but well-kept, reflected a lifetime of discipline and care. The veteran enjoyed the simplicity of life now. His days were filled with tending his small garden, sipping coffee on the porch, and reminiscing about memories of friends he had lost over the years. Neighbors often waved as they passed by, and he returned their greetings with a kind smile. Although he lived alone, he was not lonely. His grandson visited regularly, bringing energy and laughter that brightened the house. They shared stories, played simple board games, and often went for short walks in the neighborhood. The veteran found comfort in these visits, knowing that he had someone he could trust and rely on. The neighborhood was usually harmonious, but tensions had begun to simmer quietly. The HOA had started enforcing minor rules more aggressively. A flower pot placed slightly outside the designated area, a mailbox that did not meet precise measurements, or a small flag displayed for a short period could be considered violations. Most residents tried to follow the rules to avoid confrontation, but Karen had a way of turning small infractions into significant conflicts. She seemed to believe it was her duty to maintain order, even if it meant overstepping personal boundaries. Her visits were often unannounced, her tone sharp, and her presence intimidating. People whispered about her behind closed doors, sharing stories of her relentless inspections and her eagerness to report neighbors to the HOA board. While many tried to avoid her, others had no choice but to face her when she singled them out. The veteran had already had a few encounters with the HOA, though nothing severe. A garden decoration he had placed near the porch had been questioned, and a small flag he displayed on national holidays had prompted a complaint. He had always responded politely, explaining his intentions and assuring them that he respected the community's rules. Most of the time, the disputes ended without further escalation, but he had begun to notice Karen's interest in his property. He did not think much of it at first, assuming she was merely doing her job. But there was something unsettling about the way she watched the house from a distance, noting every detail. It made him uneasy, and he started to consider ways to protect his privacy while continuing his daily routine. His grandson, who often came to visit during weekends, had noticed Karen's behavior too. A smart and observant young man, he could see when someone was watching too closely, judging every move. He sometimes joked about the strictness of the HOA, but deep down he understood that their vigilance could pose a problem if taken too far. He had grown protective of his grandfather over the years, knowing how much he relied on his independence and the comfort of his home. Together, they had discussed minor strategies to maintain a peaceful life without provoking unnecessary conflict, though they never imagined the length someone like Karen might go. One sunny morning, the veteran was tending his garden, trimming a row of small bushes while his grandson was inside, working on a puzzle at the kitchen table. The air was calm, filled with the scent of freshly watered soil and blooming flowers. Birds chirped in the distance, and the gentle hum of passing cars blended into the background. Life seemed ordinary, as it always did, and for a moment they felt that sense of security that had been a constant in the veteran's life. But the calm was deceptive. From across the street, a figure watched with intensity. Karen had arrived, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the veteran's property with a sharpness that felt invasive. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and her brow furrowed as she observed the garden decorations and the small flag that fluttered gently in the morning breeze. She muttered to herself, noting everything in her notebook, as if preparing a report for the board. Her presence, though distant, created a tension that could be felt even from a distance. The veteran sensed it, pausing in his work and glancing up. There was a familiarity to her scrutiny that made him uncomfortable. He knew what it meant when Karen focused on a house. Rules would be questioned. Warnings might come and peace would be disrupted. Despite the unease, the veteran continued his gardening, maintaining his calm demeanor. He had faced many challenges in his life, and a strict HOA member, while frustrating, was something he believed he could handle. He did not want to escalate the situation unnecessarily, preferring to act with patience and dignity. His grandson, however, was more alert. He noticed the way Karen's eyes followed their every movement, and the subtle signs of disapproval that she could not hide. He had learned from experience that people like Karen did not back down easily, and that their persistence could become a serious problem. He quietly moved to the window, keeping an eye on her, prepared to step in if needed. There was an unspoken agreement between the two of them. They would continue their lives, but they would also protect their home and each other. As the day passed, Karen seemed to grow more determined. She walked around the street, occasionally peering over fences, noting details that most people would never consider violations. Her obsession with order was visible in the way she scrutinized every inch of the neighborhood, and it was clear that the veteran's house had caught her attention. She made a few calls on her phone, speaking in a low, urgent tone, likely discussing what she perceived as infractions and how to address them. The veteran and his grandson remained calm, but a sense of unease lingered in the air. The peaceful rhythm of their day had been interrupted, replaced by the subtle pressure of being watched and judged. By evening, the veteran had finished his gardening and sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the street, and the neighborhood seemed to breathe a collective sigh of calm. Yet Karen had not left. She lingered at the end of the street, observing quietly, as if plotting her next move. The grandson joined his grandfather on the porch, and they exchanged a look that conveyed understanding. They knew that Karen's presence was more than a minor nuisance. There was a possibility of direct confrontation, and they needed to be prepared. The veteran felt a mixture of frustration and patience, recalling the many lessons his life had taught him about resilience and calm under pressure. He also felt gratitude for his grandson, who had grown into a careful and observant young man, ready to act if the situation demanded it. The night arrived, bringing a cooler breeze and a sense of stillness. The veteran went inside, locking doors and windows, ensuring that the house was secure. The grandson, curious but cautious, remained vigilant, aware that the presence of someone like Karen could escalate quickly. They discussed minor precautions, from the placement of security cameras to alert systems, though they did not want to live in fear. Their focus was on maintaining dignity, independence, and peace. The events of the day had reminded them that even in a quiet, seemingly safe neighborhood, vigilance and awareness were necessary. It was a delicate balance between respecting rules, protecting privacy, and navigating the challenges posed by people who overstepped boundaries. As they prepared for sleep, the veteran reflected on his life, the battles fought, the discipline learned, and the calm endurance that had carried him through decades of change. He knew that challenges would continue to come, sometimes in unexpected forms like an overzealous HOA member. But he also knew that he had the strength, experience, and support of his grandson to face them. The night was calm, but the tension lingered beneath the surface, a quiet reminder that the peace of the neighborhood was fragile, and that vigilance was not a choice, but a necessity. In that quiet suburban neighborhood, life continued with its routines and simple pleasures. Yet in the shadows of order and rules, a storm was quietly brewing, one that would soon challenge the calm, test patience, and reveal the courage and resourcefulness of a 78-year-old veteran and his devoted grandson. The events of the day had set the stage for a confrontation that neither could fully anticipate, but both were ready to meet with resolve and dignity. Peace, they knew, was precious, and they would protect it at any cost, even in the face of unreasonable scrutiny and audacious intrusion. The next morning started with the familiar warmth of sunlight spilling through the windows. Birds chirped cheerfully, and the veteran moved slowly around his house, enjoying the quiet rhythm of a day that promised little disturbance. But the peace was deceptive. Across the street, Karen was already awake and on the move, her determination visible in her purposeful stride. She had decided that observation alone would no longer suffice. The notes she had taken the previous day had confirmed in her mind that the veteran's property was a problem that needed direct attention. Her reputation within the HOA demanded action, and she had convinced herself that she was enforcing rules for the greater good of the neighborhood. The veteran, unaware of Karen's plans, continued his morning routine. He watered the garden, checked on his small collection of potted plants, and adjusted a few decorations that had been slightly disturbed by the wind overnight. His grandson was helping inside, preparing breakfast and chatting about school, sports, and stories from the past week. The two shared laughter, a bond strengthened over years of love and shared experiences. The grandson, however, remained alert, his eyes occasionally flicking toward the street. There was an instinctive awareness of Karen's presence, a recognition that her focus on their house had not diminished. He noticed subtle movements from across the street, the way she paused to inspect a bush or tilt her head to examine a decoration. Her scrutiny was invasive, and it carried a weight that neither of them appreciated. Karen approached the house cautiously, ensuring that no one else in the neighborhood was observing her actions. She carried a clipboard with printed HOA guidelines and a pen poised for notes. Her mind was filled with rules and regulations, the kind that most people ignored or took lightly. To her, however, every detail mattered, and the veteran's house was an example of negligence that required correction. She muttered to herself, reviewing past complaints and preparing to document the alleged violations. The intensity in her eyes suggested that she was prepared to escalate matters beyond a simple conversation. The veteran, meanwhile, remained focused on his morning, completely unaware of the impending confrontation. He hummed quietly while trimming a bush, enjoying the physical activity that kept him fit and engaged. He had faced much tougher challenges in his life, and yet there was a subtle tension in the air that he could feel instinctively. His grandson sensed it too. He had watched Karen's behavior over time and had learned to recognize patterns. Certain body language, certain pauses, and the way someone lingered too long near the property were warning signs. He whispered to his grandfather about what he observed. A quiet conversation that did not disrupt the veteran's calm, but conveyed caution and awareness. Karen finally stepped onto the sidewalk in front of the veteran's house, her eyes scanning every detail. She noticed the small flag fluttering gently in the breeze and the carefully arranged garden decorations. To most, these details would seem harmless, even charming, but Karen viewed them as defiance of the neighborhood's rules. She pulled out her phone and made a brief call to another HOA member, her voice low but urgent. She described her observations and suggested immediate action, expressing her certainty that the situation could not be ignored. The conversation seemed to embolden her further, as if confirmation from another member justified more extreme measures. The grandson moved closer to the window, his fingers gently pressing against the glass as he tried to anticipate her next steps. He felt a mix of concern and protectiveness, knowing that his grandfather valued independence and peace. He also understood that Karen's persistence could escalate beyond mere observation. Her behavior had become increasingly intrusive, and he sensed that a confrontation was imminent. He quietly alerted his grandfather, who paused and straightened, taking a deep breath to prepare himself mentally for whatever might come. Karen decided to approach the house directly. She knocked firmly on the door, but there was no response. The veteran had not yet heard her approach, and the grandson was careful to remain unseen, quietly monitoring the situation. Karen knocked again, a bit louder, and called out, demanding to speak about alleged violations. Still, there was no immediate answer. Frustration crept across her face, and her tone sharpened. She muttered about residents who ignored rules and considered ignoring the HOA's authority. Her words carried a sense of urgency and self-righteousness that made the situation tense, even from a distance. The veteran finally appeared at the door, his posture calm but firm. He greeted her politely, acknowledging her presence without showing fear or irritation. Karen launched into her complaints, listing rules and alleged violations, her voice a mixture of authority and indignation. She spoke quickly, flipping through papers and referencing the HOA's guidelines. The veteran listened patiently, his expression neutral, nodding occasionally but offering no immediate rebuttal. He understood the importance of maintaining composure, even in the face of unreasonable demands. His grandson remained inside, close enough to intervene if needed, but careful not to escalate the tension further. Karen's frustration grew as the conversation continued. The veteran explained his actions calmly, describing the purpose of the garden decorations and the significance of the flag. He spoke about the importance of personal expression and the respect he had for the neighborhood's rules. His voice was steady, his demeanor composed, and his words carried the weight of experience and reason. Karen, however, was not satisfied. She believed that enforcement required more than discussion. It required action. The calm responses only fueled her determination to push further, convinced that the rules must be upheld regardless of context or reasoning. As the conversation drew out, Karen's tone shifted subtly, her patience wearing thin. She glanced around the property, noting details she believed were violations. Her eyes lingered on a window slightly ajar, the kind of oversight that most people would ignore. In her mind, this was proof that the veteran was careless or defiant. She stepped closer to the house, speaking more forcefully, unaware that her actions were crossing boundaries that most would consider private. The grandson's attention sharpened, recognizing that her behavior was escalating beyond normal confrontation. He quietly reached for the home's security system controls, prepared to activate alerts if necessary. The veteran noticed the change in her demeanor and sensed that the situation might become more invasive. He calmly suggested continuing the discussion at another time or in a more structured manner, emphasizing respect and understanding. Karen, however, had become fixated on the notion of immediate enforcement. Her persistence created a tension that hung in the air, thick and uncomfortable. The grandson, aware of the potential for physical intrusion, positioned himself near the controls, ready to protect the home and his grandfather from any aggressive move. Karen's eyes shifted to the window that was slightly open. In a sudden moment of audacity, she considered the possibility of entering the property directly. The thought crossed her mind with alarming seriousness. She justified it to herself, believing that enforcement required inspection and intervention. The grandson, sensing the impending risk, quickly made a decision. He activated a low-level alert on the security system, a precaution designed to monitor unusual activity and alert authorities if necessary. The lights flashed softly, sensors engaged, and the house prepared to respond to intrusion. The veteran remained calm, trusting his grandson's judgment and experience with modern technology. The air grew tense, charged with anticipation. Karen's focus on the window was unwavering, and her next steps could determine the course of events. The grandson moved quietly, observing, ensuring that no immediate threat reached his grandfather. The veteran, understanding the seriousness of the moment, prepared mentally for whatever might come, knowing that patience, composure, and vigilance were his best tools. Karen's determination had reached a critical point, and the calm neighborhood that had been their sanctuary now seemed precarious and fragile. Throughout the morning, the veteran and his grandson navigated the situation with care. The veteran engaged politely, maintaining dignity and composure while the grandson ensured safety through observation and preparation. Karen, consumed by her perception of duty, pushed boundaries further than most residents would tolerate. The tension grew, a delicate balance of patience, courage, and awareness holding the situation from becoming more dangerous. The events of the morning highlighted the challenges of living under strict scrutiny, the importance of vigilance and the power of calm, reasoned responses in the face of audacity and intrusion. By midday, the confrontation had reached a peak of tension. Karen's determination was evident, and the grandson's protective instincts were fully engaged. The veteran remained composed, understanding that the situation required both patience and alertness. The neighborhood, once calm and peaceful, now felt like a stage for an unfolding drama, a reminder that even in ordinary surroundings, challenges could arise that tested character, courage, and the strength of family bonds. The morning had set the stage for events that would demand quick thinking, resilience, and resourcefulness, and both the veteran and his grandson were ready to face whatever came next. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the veteran's yard, highlighting the peaceful garden that had been the center of his pride for many years. Yet the calm was a fragile illusion, teetering on the edge of an impending storm. Karen's determination had grown stronger with every minute, and she now stood at the edge of the driveway, clipboard in hand, eyes fixed on the small window slightly ajar on the side of the house. In her mind, enforcement of the HOA rules justified almost any action, and she had convinced herself that closer inspection was necessary to correct what she perceived as ongoing negligence. Her sense of authority and righteousness blinded her to the boundaries of personal space and common decency. Inside the house, the veteran continued his routine with deliberate calm, tending to minor chores and sipping tea on the porch. His grandson moved quietly, positioning himself near the security system and keeping a careful watch on Karen's movements. The young man's instincts told him that Karen might attempt something more audacious than a simple complaint. He had seen enough of her behavior over time to understand that she often allowed her self-assigned sense of duty to overshadow common sense and respect. The tension was subtle but palpable, a quiet unease that seemed to ripple through the walls of the home. Karen circled the house slowly, taking in every detail with obsessive precision. Her eyes scanned the garden, the flag, and even the small window she had fixated on earlier. Each observation seemed to reinforce her belief that immediate action was required. She paused near the side of the house, crouching slightly to get a better view of the interior through the partially open window. Her mind raced with justifications for crossing the line of personal property, convinced that the veteran's behavior warranted direct intervention. The grandson, recognizing the danger, kept a calm but alert stance, fingers resting near the control panel of the security system. The veteran noticed her unusual movement and straightened, maintaining a composed but watchful posture. He had faced many challenges in his life, from intense situations overseas to personal trials at home, and he knew that confrontation required measured responses. He spoke to his grandson quietly, reminding him to remain calm but vigilant. Their unspoken communication was precise and practiced, a testament to years of trust and understanding. They both knew that a misstep could escalate the situation into something far more serious than either wanted. Karen, emboldened by her observations, decided to take the next step. Without knocking again or waiting for permission, she began to move toward the window, a sense of urgency driving her actions. The grandson's heart raced, and he made a split-second decision to activate a low-level alert on the security system. Soft lights flashed around the house, sensors monitored movement, and a subtle alarm sent notifications to a nearby monitoring service. The veteran, seeing the seriousness of the moment, remained calm, his experience and patience guiding his response. He positioned himself in a way that allowed him to observe Karen's actions while staying safely within the house. Karen reached for the window, her hands gripping the frame with determination. In her mind, she was merely performing her duty, ensuring that the rules were upheld and the neighborhood remained orderly. She did not fully consider the audacity or illegality of her actions, convinced that her intentions justified any means. The grandson, sensing the imminent breach, spoke firmly, warning her to stop. His voice carried authority and clarity, a clear message that the property was private and that further intrusion would not be tolerated. Karen hesitated for a moment, surprised by the firmness of the warning, but her resolve did not waver. She adjusted her grip, determined to proceed despite the opposition. The veteran, understanding the potential danger, moved slightly closer to the door, ready to intervene if necessary. His voice remained calm and steady, a mixture of authority and reason. He explained once more that the property was private, that the decorations and flag were personal choices, and that the HOA rules did not justify unauthorized entry. His words were deliberate, measured, and intended to de-escalate the situation without compromising safety. Karen, however, seemed to interpret his calmness as hesitation or weakness, reinforcing her belief that she could push further. As she attempted to climb through the window, the security system activated fully. A loud alarm sounded, lights flashed, and sensors detected the intrusion. Karen froze, momentarily startled by the sudden response. The grandson remained alert, monitoring the situation and preparing to notify authorities if necessary. The veteran, seeing that the immediate threat was contained, continued to speak calmly, trying to maintain a sense of control over an unpredictable situation. His composure seemed to contrast sharply with Karen's escalating agitation, highlighting the difference between reasoned patience and reckless determination. Karen stepped back from the window, shaken by the alarm but not entirely deterred. Her frustration was evident, a mix of embarrassment and anger fueling her next actions. She muttered under her breath, pacing slightly as she considered how to justify her behavior and maintain her sense of authority. The grandson, recognizing the need for continued vigilance, remained close to the window, ready to respond to any further attempts. The veteran stayed composed, understanding that the situation was tense but that calm reasoning was their best defense. Minutes passed in a tense standoff. Karen's focus remained on the property, her mind cycling through rules, violations, and justifications. The veteran and his grandson remained steady, a united front of calm and awareness. The security system continued to monitor, its presence a clear warning that further intrusion would trigger a more serious response. The neighborhood, usually quiet and unassuming, seemed to hold its breath, the subtle tension of the confrontation creating an almost tangible atmosphere. Passers-by might have noticed the unusual scene, but few understood the intensity of the standoff and the courage required to remain composed in the face of audacious intrusion. Karen, finally realizing that her actions had been detected and that further escalation could result in consequences, paused. Her confidence wavered, and she began to reconsider her approach. The veteran's calm demeanor and the grandson's vigilance had created a barrier she could not easily overcome. Her sense of authority, once seemingly absolute, was challenged by reasoned patience and technological preparedness. The alarm, the flashing lights, and the possibility of law enforcement intervention forced her to acknowledge that her plan had limits. The veteran, speaking in a calm voice, invited Karen to discuss any concerns through proper channels, emphasizing the importance of communication and respect. He maintained his dignity, refusing to engage in anger or confrontation, but making it clear that boundaries were not negotiable. The grandson remained a quiet but powerful presence, a reminder that safety and vigilance were priorities in their home. Karen, after a long moment of hesitation, slowly backed away from the window, her determination still present but tempered by the realization that further intrusion could have serious consequences. The tension began to dissipate as Karen retreated to the edge of the property. The alarm subsided, lights returned to normal, and the immediate threat was over. The veteran and his grandson exhaled, their shared relief a quiet but profound acknowledgement of the intensity they had just faced. They had maintained composure, protected their home, and confronted audacity with patience, awareness, and careful planning. The neighborhood once again returned to a semblance of calm, though the echoes of the confrontation lingered in the minds of those directly involved. The afternoon ended with a mixture of reflection and caution. The veteran reviewed the events quietly, thinking about the importance of vigilance, patience, and preparedness. His grandson, equally reflective, considered the lessons learned about protecting home, family, and dignity. Karen, from a distance, likely reviewed her own actions, perhaps questioning her judgment or reaffirming her sense of duty, though the consequences of the attempted intrusion had left a lasting impression. The events of the day highlighted the delicate balance between authority and respect, the importance of boundaries, and the courage required to defend personal space without escalating conflict unnecessarily. As evening approached, the veteran and his grandson resumed their routine, tending to chores and enjoying simple conversation. The calm of the home contrasted sharply with the tension of the confrontation, a reminder that safety and peace were often fragile and required vigilance. The neighborhood, unaware of the intensity of the events, continued its quiet rhythm, the maple trees casting shadows that swayed gently in the evening breeze. Yet the veteran and his grandson knew that they had faced a defining moment, one that would remain in their minds as a testament to composure, courage, and the power of standing firm in the face of audacious intrusion. The confrontation had tested their patience and resolve, but it had also reaffirmed the importance of protecting home, family, and dignity, no matter the challenge. The moment Karen backed away from the window, the tension that had gripped the veteran's home began to ease slightly, but the sense of unease remained. Both the veteran and his grandson understood that the audacity of Karen's attempt could not go unnoticed. They knew that while they had successfully prevented intrusion, the situation had escalated beyond a mere disagreement with the HOA. The grandson moved to check the security system logs, ensuring that every movement had been recorded. He felt a mix of relief and determination, knowing that the evidence they had collected would be essential if the situation continued to escalate or required legal intervention. Within minutes, the system's notifications had been sent to the monitoring service, which quickly relayed the alerts to local authorities. A sense of reassurance settled over the household as they realized that the intrusion had not gone unnoticed, and that assistance was on the way if needed. The veteran, sitting calmly on the porch with a cup of tea, reflected on how quickly situations could escalate, even in a neighborhood that seemed so safe and ordinary. He knew that vigilance and preparation were vital, not just for physical safety but for maintaining peace of mind. The grandson, observing the neighborhood street from the window, kept a steady watch, ensuring that Karen did not attempt another bold move before the authorities arrived. Meanwhile, Karen, standing at the edge of the property, wrestled with a combination of embarrassment, frustration, and determination. Her belief in the importance of enforcing HOA rules was unwavering, but the alarm and the evident preparedness of the veteran's household had forced her to pause. She muttered under her breath, flipping through her clipboard for notes, likely trying to justify her actions and prepare for a report to the HOA board. Her focus on the rules had blinded her to the personal boundaries and legal considerations she had crossed. For the first time, she faced a scenario where her overzealousness could have tangible consequences. As the minutes passed, a patrol car slowly drove down the street, responding to the notification sent by the security system. The veteran and his grandson watched quietly, ready to provide information if necessary but maintaining a calm and respectful demeanor. The veteran, despite his age and the stress of the situation, carried himself with dignity. He spoke softly to his grandson, explaining that remaining composed and respectful was as important as the technical defenses they had in place. It was a lesson in patience and strategic thinking, demonstrating that courage was not always loud or aggressive but often quiet, steady, and calculated. The officers arrived and stepped out of their vehicle, approaching the property cautiously. They were met by the grandson, who quickly explained the situation, including Karen's attempted intrusion and the activation of the security system. The veteran joined them shortly after, offering a clear and concise account of the events. He emphasized that while no physical harm had occurred, the attempt to enter the property without permission constituted a serious concern. The officers listened attentively, their expressions showing a combination of concern and professionalism. They acknowledged the seriousness of the incident and reassured the veteran and his grandson that it would be addressed appropriately. Karen, sensing the arrival of law enforcement, attempted to explain her actions. She spoke quickly, referencing HOA rules and her perceived duty to enforce them. The officers listened patiently, but made it clear that entering someone's property without permission was not justified, regardless of her intentions. The veteran and his grandson provided additional context, ensuring that the authorities understood both the events leading up to the incident and the behavior that had prompted the security system's activation. Karen's arguments, focused on adherence to rules rather than respect for personal boundaries, were met with polite but firm guidance from the officers. It became evident to her that her actions had crossed legal and social boundaries, and she would need to answer for them beyond the HOA. Once the officers had taken statements and assessed the situation, they spoke privately with Karen, outlining the legal implications of her attempted intrusion. She appeared flustered and defensive, realizing that her rigid adherence to rules had resulted in a confrontation that could have serious consequences. The veteran and his grandson remained calm, observing from a safe distance, their composure a silent reminder of the effectiveness of patience and preparedness. They knew that the immediate danger had passed, but they also understood that Karen's behavior could have lingering effects on the neighborhood and the HOA community. After the officers departed, the veteran and his grandson discussed the incident quietly. They reflected on how quickly a routine day could become tense and how important it was to maintain vigilance and preparedness. The grandson praised his grandfather for remaining composed, highlighting that courage often comes in quiet, thoughtful actions rather than impulsive responses. The veteran in turn commended his grandson for his quick thinking with the security system, recognizing the importance of combining experience with modern technology to ensure safety. Their conversation was filled with a sense of shared accomplishment and relief, underscoring the strength of family bonds and mutual support in challenging situations. The neighborhood began to return to its usual rhythm, though whispers of the incident began to circulate among neighbors. Some expressed shock at the audacity of the attempted intrusion, while others discussed the need for balance between HOA rules and personal boundaries. The veteran and his grandson remained cautious but composed, aware that their actions had set an example of how to navigate conflicts with reason, respect, and preparation. Their home, once threatened by an overzealous authority figure, had been defended successfully without resorting to anger or aggression, a testament to the power of calm strategy and thoughtful action. Karen, meanwhile, likely began to reconsider her approach to rule enforcement. The intervention of law enforcement, combined with the clear boundaries set by the veteran and his grandson, highlighted the limits of her authority. Her reputation within the HOA might have been challenged, and she faced the reality that overstepping personal boundaries carried tangible consequences. The incident would likely serve as a reminder that vigilance and adherence to rules must always be balanced with respect for individual rights and legal considerations. As the evening settled over the neighborhood, the veteran and his grandson returned to their usual activities. The garden, once a focal point of tension, now stood as a symbol of resilience and calm. The veteran reflected on the events of the day, recognizing that challenges could arise unexpectedly, even in seemingly peaceful surroundings. He appreciated the importance of preparedness, not only in terms of technology and security measures, but also in maintaining a composed mindset capable of navigating difficult situations effectively. The grandson, equally thoughtful, considered the lessons learned about vigilance, respect, and the importance of standing firm in the face of audacity. Their shared experience reinforced their bond, highlighting the power of communication, trust, and coordinated action. They understood that protecting home, family, and dignity required both mental and practical preparedness, combining wisdom from experience with the tools and knowledge available in modern life. The neighborhood, slowly returning to its quiet routine, had been subtly transformed by the events of the day. Residents became more aware of the delicate balance between authority and personal boundaries, and conversations likely emerged about how HOA rules should be enforced with respect and caution. The veteran and his grandson, having navigated the confrontation successfully, felt a renewed sense of confidence in their ability to handle unexpected challenges while maintaining composure and dignity. As night fell, the veteran and his grandson sat together on the porch, reflecting on the resilience, courage, and mutual support that had carried them through a tense and potentially dangerous situation. They had faced audacity with calm, reason, and preparedness, reinforcing the values that had guided them throughout their lives. The incident with Karen had tested their patience, vigilance, and strategic thinking, but it had also demonstrated the effectiveness of careful planning, respectful communication, and a steadfast commitment to protecting home and family. In the quiet of the evening, the veteran and his grandson felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. The confrontation had been resolved without harm, boundaries had been respected, and lessons had been learned. Their home, once a target of overzealous scrutiny, now stood as a symbol of resilience, courage, and the power of reasoned action in the face of audacious intrusion. The events of the day would remain in their minds as a reminder that vigilance, preparation, and calm composure are essential in navigating conflicts, even in the most unexpected of circumstances. They understood that the strength of family, combined with careful planning and thoughtful action, could overcome even the most challenging situations, protecting both dignity and peace of mind.